Alright guys, welcome back for another video on Kuroko's basketball, and today I'm going to show you guys a simple trick with mechanics which can help to improve your win rate, especially for those of you guys who are solo matchmaking. Okay, so I know obviously ideally in this game you want to play with friends. It's basically just a better experience if you do play with some friends, but for those of you who are solo matchmaking, don't worry, you can still have very high win rate as long as you are good enough, and also you're able to communicate that to your teammates, which I will show you exactly what that is all about in this video. Okay, but just to show you guys some evidence or proof, so right now I have 73% win rate, pretty much just from solo matchmaking. There were 6 matches which I played in team rank purely because there was an event which required me to basically get the reward. So it was this event. Let me just show you. And this event happened twice, so that's kind of why there's 6 matches. So it's this match task. So there's one which required play 3 team rank matches. That happened twice. So basically I had 6 matches which I just used to unlock the missions. But other than that, my other 85 were solo plays. So you guys can see here, right? They're all solo plays. There are occasions, so for example, those were team pre-made one for that event, and there should be another one somewhere recently. Another 3 hit, okay? But other than that, all of the rest of the matches I was solo playing the whole time, and I can achieve 73% win rate. And a huge part of that is going to be down to the mechanics, which I'm going to show you guys today, okay? And I feel like a lot of solo players don't know this because I didn't even see many people do this in the game. But basically, it's right underneath this team matchmaking section. Okay, this is pre-game setup. A lot of people go into this and they put their best characters in here, which is fair enough. But the most important thing in this section is actually in the quick message, because especially for solo players, this is literally the only chance you will be able to communicate with your teammates, and that is essentially how you can devise a game plan during the middle of the match. Okay, so it's going to be very careful what messages you want to put here. There are loads of different messages to choose from, but I will show you guys what, in my opinion, are the 8 best messages, and this will dramatically improve your experience in solo matchmaking, or even in trio matchmaking. Sometimes you still want to allocate or have different roles in the middle of the match, and all of those instruction or quick messages will help you guys to do that. Okay, so let's start off with the obvious one. So for the first 2, you should always pick our block first, our block second, and that's because a lot of characters in this game have basically 2 block timing for a lot of their attacks, especially the ones attacking the basket directly. Okay, so for example, Kisei, Aomine, loads of characters basically have like a dunk. So for example, Kisei has a normal dunk, which is the first blocking point, and then he has like a 360 turnaround dunk, which is basically his second point. Same thing with Aomine. Aomine has a dunk as his first block timing, and then he can also switch that up to a layup for the second block timing. And it's going to be very important for you guys to decide who will be defending which point, okay? And that's so that you can allocate it perfectly within your team, so that no matter what the opponent do, you will have someone there trying to block it. Now, whether or not you can actually block it, that's obviously down to ability, but as bare minimum, you need to allocate that. Because if you do not allocate this, what's going to happen is that you and your teammate will just be jumping randomly, and there's a very high chance the enemy would just get it right, okay? And that's one of the worst things possible, because essentially you're just giving away 3 points because you didn't allocate the defense between yourself and also your teammate. So this is always going to be the number 1 thing you want in your quick messages. And then very closely related to that is the next 2 messages I have here, which is going to be defend the paint and also the defend perimeter. So basically the way you want to look at this is that block first and block second, that's basically to do with the timing, right? Do you want to block the first timing or block the second timing? However, defend the paint and defend the perimeter is kind of telling you about the positioning. So once again, for example, Kisei, Aomine, loads of characters in this game have both attacks. For example, they can drive and then do a dunk or layup, or they can drive and then do a fadeaway. So as a result, it's not just about allocating the first and second block timing, you also have to allocate the positioning as well. And a lot of time it should be somewhat straightforward that the center should be defending the paint, and somewhere else would be, for example, whoever is marking that character should be defending the perimeter. But sometimes I have also seen teammates who just want to, for whatever reason, follow the opposition, I mean, they will key set to the basket because they think they will be dunking. So they basically just go all the way, retreat back to the basket where they will just simply fade away and no one will be guarding that completely, leaving the enemy completely open. Okay, so essentially defend the paint and defend the perimeter is a way to tell your teammates that who should be defending which type of attacks, and therefore you will be able to position them perfectly as well. Okay, so those four to me are kind of like the bare minimum you need to have in your quick messages. Now the others is more down to your personal preference, but those four to me are also very, very good choices. So I'm going to tell you guys why. The first one is going to be don't hold the ball for too long. Now there's actually another variation of this, which is pass more, but sometimes I feel like pass more, it can sound a bit rude, and as a result your teammate might feel like you're getting toxic, and then that brings negativity in the match, which is not ideal. So what I want to do instead is to change it to a different message, and this message can actually be interpreted in two different ways. So once, don't hold the ball for too long, which basically suggests to a teammate you should be passing that. The second thing is that sometimes I also see people just, for what reason, they just keep on driving, holding the ball and driving all the time. Or for example, they could have easily passed the ball back to a teammate to bring it outside of the 3-point line. Instead, they just want to carry the ball all the way from the center of the court all the way to the perimeter just to, have the changeover. However, a lot of time when you hold the ball for too long, they will be stolen. Okay, basically in this game, if you hold the ball for anything more than 2 seconds, the likelihood of that ball getting stolen is going to increase. So basically the way you actually use this message essentially serves two purposes, and therefore it's quite good because essentially you have one message which can be used for two different type of gameplay or strategy. Okay, so that's kind of why I really like this message, especially in comparison to pass mode, which, like I said, can sometimes sound a bit toxic or rude. Then the next one is going to be man-to-man. This one is going to sound a bit rude, but unfortunately there isn't really a good alternative for this, but essentially man-to-man just telling your teammate that you need to guard whoever you are marking closely. A lot of time, one of the biggest mistake I have seen is that, for example, a shoot guard or some kind of guard decide to come in and jump for a rebound, leaving their marker completely, or leaving whoever they're supposed to be marking completely open, and that's very dangerous, especially if you're a shoot guard and your opponent is also a shoot guard. If you miss the rebound, if your side miss the rebound, they're going to get an open three. Okay, that's a massive game changer. You do not want to let that happen. And let's be honest, if you're a guard, unless you happen to be right next to the rebound point, otherwise you're not going to compete against the centers or the power forwards, etc. So rather than risking that for, I don't know, like a 1% chance of getting a rebound, you should actually just be on your opponent 100% the time to make sure they never get an open opportunity. Okay, so this is something which I see a lot, and man-to-man is normally for those kind of circumstances. Another type of situation which I also see a lot is some people just, for what reason, they just want to spam stealing. Maybe because they have a Kuroko or some kind of like point guard who you have very high control or steal, and they decide to just spam stealing skills all the time. But a lot of time when you spam stealing skill, essentially that means you are not currently marking your opponent because there's a stagger when you actually try to do an unsuccessful steal, and people can literally just drive and have an open shoot straight away. So that's also going to be another occasion where I think man-to-man is going to be quite useful to just remind your teammates that don't bother trying anything else, just make sure you're 100% on your teammate, on your opposition the whole time. Okay, then the next one is going to be space out. So once again, there's another variation of this, which is called go away and let me do a solo. But that, like, if you know basketball, you probably know this is trying to say you want to do an ISO. However, if you don't know basketball, this is going to sound extremely, extremely rude, and once again can get the match to be fairly toxic. So that's kind of why I don't really want to use this message, and instead I'll use something called space out. And space out once again can be actually interpreted in two different ways, and therefore I think it's quite nice that even though it's a quite short message, you can actually use it for two different type of game plan. Okay, so one is obviously if you actually want to do an ISO. So the idea here is that you do not want your teammates to bring whoever's marking them onto marking you as well, because sometimes, for example, let's say if you're a shooting guard, and let's say your center is trying to set up a screen. However, unless they're able to set up the screen completely perfectly, otherwise it's actually more likely that they will be bringing whoever is guarding them onto defending you as well, because your center will be moving towards you, and therefore whoever's marking them would also be moving towards you, and that can actually make it harder for you to maneuver around. So sometimes ISO is a perfectly fine strategy, which is why if you ever see someone say go away and let me do a solo, they're not saying I'm being a selfish player. What they're saying is that you should just stand away from them so that you do not bring whoever is marking you into assisting defending your teammate. Okay, so that's basically the idea. So that's basically one way of how you can use this message. The other way of how this message can be interpreted is actually that if you're actually playmaking, what you want to do is you want to make sure your teammate are spread out as far as possible. So once again, they cannot be assisting in defense. And also, for example, the likes of Izuki, who already have 2 different block timing, you can actually attract your opponent to try to guard you. And if your teammates are also spread out, that basically means whoever is trying to block you would not be there to get back in time to also defend against your teammate. Okay, so space out a lot of times is also very useful for the playmakers to let your teammates know that I'm about to pass. Make sure you create some open opportunity by stretching out the paint as much as possible, so that when they come and defend me, you will get an open opportunity to shoot. Okay, so that's basically another way of how you can use the space out message. And then the last message I normally like is going to be stall. So this is a lot of time just essentially to run out of the clock. Now, a lot of time you want to keep an eye out on the match, especially if it's a very tight match and you are leading only by like 1 or 2 points. Sometimes you don't actually need to rush to play out and shoot straight away. You actually want to run out of the clock, because in those cases, even if you actually fail to score, what's going to happen is the opponent may not actually have enough time to score themselves as well. Okay, so stall is normally quite useful for, let's say, the last 20 or 30 seconds of the match, depending on how far you are leading. So a lot of time what's going to happen is that maybe not everyone keep an eye on the clock, but someone on your team should be keeping an eye on the clock, and if they notice that, then they should be saying this message to let the rest of your team know that there's no rush to score anymore. Let's just run out of the clock, and then we can win this game for sure. Okay, so that's basically the use case of stall. So yeah, so those 8 messages, in my opinion, are the best choices here. Now, obviously, there are going to be some personal preference in case you, depending on what position you want to play, you may want to choose some other ones, like I need help and I need help of pick and roll, or I need defense assist, etc. Now, the only thing I would be say slightly careful about some of those ones, that those messages tend to have an opportunity cost. So let's say if your teammate do say, you know, they need help with pick and roll, or defense assist, one thing I do want to remind you guys is that do not bite more than what you can chew. Okay, so actually make a judgment yourself whether or not that is a good tactical play. Because for example, if you're the center, you go out and try to help to set up a screen for your teammate, that normally comes at opportunity cost of you not be able to go back and then grab the rebound. So unless you can you're sure you can actually set up a successful screen, otherwise if your teammate miss, you're going to lose that rebound straight away. Okay, and same thing with defense assist. Obviously it's been nice to actually help your teammate to defend. However, if that is at a cost of you not then able to defend whoever you are supposed to be marking, that is an opportunity cost. Okay, so if you do ever see teammates using those kind of messages, then have a judgment call in your head whether or not that is actually the right thing to do. And like I said, do not bite more than what you can chew. Okay. All right, so that's everything I want to cover in this video. Hopefully this was helpful, and this is, like I said, this is very, very important, especially for solo players, because this is literally the only chance you will be able to communicate with the random teammates, okay? But yeah, let me know what you guys think of this, and also if there are any other messages which you think is really good, then do let us know in the comment section.